A Roman local freezes when he hears a loud rumbling noise behind him. This is Pompeii, after all, and that ominous volcano has been very lively recently. But for once this noise isn't Mount Vesuvius. No, behind him is a chariot like no other he's ever seen. It was kind of like the supercar of its day, and it wouldn't be until 2021 when archaeologists finally dug up the blinged-up chariot that people discovered what this strange machine really was. Archaeologists are challenged after uncovering ancient chariot in Pompeii. At the time, of course, the only chariots normal Romans would see were traces. But this chariot was nothing like the light two-wheelers that the crowds cheered on at the circus events. The strange conveyance was almost a super chariot, and that description isn't too far from the truth. Ordinary Romans didn't travel around in a chariot. Instead, they'd plod along with oxen heaving a cart. And on the off chance that a Roman might have seen a chariot, it would have belonged to the army. So this new super chariot wouldn't have been something usually found on the open road. It was, in fact, a revelation. While the chariot was obviously a four-wheeled carriage, it wasn't the type sometimes seen carrying bricks or work equipment. The ornamentation on the vehicle as revealed by the latest archaeological dig is something out of the ordinary, too. But what was it for? The mystery of the strange super chariot was wiped out as Mount Vesuvius erupted and smothered the thriving city. Many of its citizens were snuffed out in the catastrophe, and no one ever built there again, possibly from fear of suffering the same fate. But, as it turned out, it wouldn't be the last time anyone saw the chariot. The chariot would lie undisturbed for many centuries until found as part of a criminal investigation. Yes, you read that right. The authorities had realized that robbers had allegedly been looting archaeological sites by digging tunnels. In fact, they'd found nearly 90 yards of tunneling in what had once been a Roman villa. So they set out to end the robbers' reign of terror. The robbers had seemingly dug a whole set of tunnels connected 5 yards beneath the surface. So, when alerted to these diggings, the Torre Annunziata public prosecutor's office had started its own investigation. But the prosecutor couldn't just start plowing through the archaeological remains at the site. No, it had to call in the pros to do a proper excavation. And that's when things got interesting. The dig at the Civita Giuliana villa had two aims. Firstly, find out what historical prizes could be found at the site. Secondly, stop the looters from stealing them. And it was a massive success in both respects. The archaeologists discovered some amazing relics, among them the super chariot. Obviously, once the dig got underway, the robbers were thwarted as well. They could hardly sneak along their tunnels with the archaeologists working on the site, could they? And archaeologists would dig at this special location for a long time too. The villa had been one of the most important in the region around Vesuvius, after all. But one thing that complicated the digging was that the area under study wasn't in the middle of nowhere. It was the site of modern-day buildings. And of course, the structures that the archaeologists uncovered had been protected by being underground. So they had to be carefully brought to light and expertly protected, preserved and restored. That's not always easy when you're digging up something the size of a chariot. The site of Civita Giuliana lies about half a mile to the northwest of Pompeii. And this means that it wasn't quite as urban as the busy streets of the city. In fact, it seems that it had been a thriving farm. And the prosecutor's dig was not the first to have noticed the villa. In 1907 and 1908, a nearby site had been the focus of digging by the Marquis Giovanni Imperiali. He'd been excavating an area just to the north of the prosecutor's works. The Ministry of Education had given him a permit for his investigations, and although it had been carried out more than a century ago, it hadn't been forgotten. A 1994 report described what had been found. Imperiali had discovered a total of 15 rooms belonging to two parts of the structure. One of the parts was where people lived, and the other was connected with husbandry. In the latest investigations, only 2 of the rooms have seen further exploration. They are known as rooms D and E. And they're not just bare spaces. Each contains intriguing remains. The room known as D has a window, whose wooden archwork can still be seen, and a door in its western wall. Opposite there is the window that was flooded with material from the volcano. This material is known as pyroclastic flow, and it would have made the room uncomfortable to be in. Amazingly, the decor survived the inundation with ash and lava quite well. 3 of the walls were originally coated in pale plaster, striped with red. The wall to the south had a little alcove, which housed a shrine. And in a religious niche sat the tools that the family of the home would have used to worship the spirits that protected them. These included a cup in which to burn incense, a lamp, and a couple of pots. And that wasn't all. Because pyroclastic flow had filled the room, its contents were saved for posterity. The archaeologists were delighted to find what they think is a bed and perhaps a second example as well. The earthen floor has 3 jars, perhaps for oil or wine, a saw made out of iron, a cooking pot, and some skeletal animal remains. So after room D's finds, hopes were high for room E. But what the archaeologists uncovered must have exceeded even their wildest dreams. In this room was evidence of the suddenness of Vesuvius's eruption. 2 horses had been caught by the pyroclastic flow. And incredibly, one was complete. The excavators even found some of the bronze ornamentations from the horse's tack. The archaeologists think that the horse had been saddled and was ready to go. But it wasn't to escape like so much else in the area. Yet Civita Juliana has given up other treasures too. Archaeologists found the body of a rich Roman, accompanied by a slave, at the site. Could he have been the would-be rider of the horse? It's not impossible, but Pompeii had been a thriving city. It had housed as many as 12,000 people. And many thousands were able to flee the area when the volcano blew. But not everyone was lucky enough to escape. About 2,000 citizens of Pompeii and nearby Herculaneum perished in the fiery eruption. Yet although the fate of Pompeii was well known, no one was interested in a serious dig until the 1700s. But over the next couple of hundred years or so, people kept coming back to see what they could find in the area. So much so, in fact, that by the end of the 20th century, about 2/3 of Pompeii had been dug up, although not always very well. No one stumbled across the mysterious chariot, though. Massimo Asana, who was for some time in charge of archaeological work at Pompeii, explained to Smithsonian Magazine the issues that previous work had left him. He said that Emilio Maiuri, who had had his job before him, had done a lot of digging, but he hadn't necessarily been too systematic. Unfortunately, his era was very poorly documented. It is very difficult to understand if an object came from one house or another, Asana said. What a pity. His excavations made very important discoveries, but were carried out with inadequate instruments, using inaccurate procedures. This was far from the end of the story, mind you. Archaeological work at the city received a huge boost from the Great Pompeii Project. It's a program of conservation for the site that has been a great success and helped people discover amazing things. These have included a sorceress's kit and a snack bar. Yes, you read that right again. The city had lots of snack bars, thermopolia as the Romans called them. You could drop in and grab a pre-cooked meal. The hole in the wall joint discovered in 2019 showed off what you could buy with its decor. Yes, it was adorned with a mural with a sea motif. Why not? It also had pictures of poultry, such as a rooster and some ducks. It's thought that you could grab a duck sandwich at this joint. But no guesswork is needed for some of its other offerings. The archaeologists found remnants that suggested that one jar had been filled with a meal of pork and fish. Another held a stew that expert Chiara Corbino told the New York Times was a concoction involving snails, fish and sheep. The project hasn't just involved spades and trowels. No, experts have been using techniques that have included drone surveys of the site and CT computerized tomography scans. And these have revealed an inscription in charcoal that shows that the eruption, once believed to have been in August 79 AD, had actually probably happened in late October. And then, of course, there's the chariot. The discovery of the super chariot that once upon a time rumbled through the streets of Pompeii may well be the greatest triumph of archaeology in the area. It was discovered in a portico not far from the stable where the intact horse had been found. And incredibly, neither the eruption nor looters had done it any harm. The Archaeological Park of Pompeii announced the find in February 2021. It said the super chariot had somehow survived intact despite the caving in of the ceiling and walls of the room that had housed it. So what the archaeologists found was still very recognizable as the vehicle it had been in 79 AD. They even discovered traces of what may have been its trappings. Perhaps the horses across the road had pulled it? So the super chariot still has its original features visible, according to the archaeologists. It has the 4 wheels upon which it rolled, crafted from iron. It has places to rest your arms and back, and on top of it, there's even a seat. It may have been able to carry 2 people. And that's not all. The chariot is lavishly decorated. Its sides have sections in bronze adorned with engravings, interspersed with panels made of wood and painted black and red. In its day, it would have made a stunning sight, and the experts believe it may have been a palentum, which is not your everyday chariot. No, this one is hung with a bunch of medallions. These pieces of metal feature capering satyrs, cupids and nymphs. Asana explained, the scenes on the medallions which embellish the rear of the chariot refer to Eros, satyrs and nymphs, while the numerous studs feature Eret's winged gods of love. And all that romantic imagery might suggest a chariot used in weddings. Asana continued, considering that the ancient sources allude to the use of the palentum by priestesses and ladies, one cannot exclude the possibility that this could have been a chariot used for rituals relating to marriage, for leading the bride to her new household. So this was not the kind of vehicle you'd use as your city runabout? No, Asana confirmed, it was nothing of the sort. Instead, it was a special kind of vehicle. He said, what we have is a ceremonial chariot, probably the palentum referred to by some sources, which was employed not for everyday use or for agricultural transport, but to accompany community festivities, parades and processions. Yet archaeologists have turned up everyday chariots from time to time. They've even found some regular ones in Pompeii that would have been used for such things as hauling carrots. But none of those had the lavish ornaments of the newly discovered super chariot. This is the first time they've ever found what might be a palentum. University of Massachusetts Amherst professor Eric Poehler, who's an expert in the lost cities traffic, told broadcaster NPR, I was astounded. Many of the vehicles I'd written about before are your standard station wagon or vehicle for taking the kids to soccer. This is a Lamborghini. This is an outright fancy car. Poehler was not the only scientist who was stunned by the discovery. Twitter resounded to the written excitement of others in the field. Cambridge University's Sophie Hay told The World, still wrapping my head around the latest incredible discovery. This truly wasn't something you find every day, and that was obvious from other tweets. University of Glasgow brain Jane Drake tweeted, my jaw is on the floor just now. And that feeling was not restricted to Glasgow. Spaniard Ruben Montoya, a writer and historian, gave his exclamation point key a workout as he joined in the chorus. He wrote that the destroyed city does not stop giving us surprises. Asana, who has moved on from taking charge of Pompeii to head Italy's museums, shared his agreement with the sentiment. He wrote in a statement, it is an extraordinary discovery for the advancement of our knowledge of the ancient world. Now that archaeologists have an intact palentum, their understanding of their use can only be boosted. Poehler told NPR, this is precisely the kind of find that one wants to find at Pompeii, the really well-articulated, very well-preserved moments in time. And you don't find a marriage chariot every day, Poehler confirmed. He said, it happens to be in this case an object that is relatively rare despite its ubiquity in the past. Once dug up, the super chariot was transported to the lab for cleaning. The next stage will be to restore and reconstruct it. It's not known what other treasures Pompeii still hides, but we can expect surprises. Italian Culture Minister Dario Franceschini told the BBC in March 2021, Pompeii continues to amaze us with its discoveries, and it will do so for many years, with 20 hectares about 50 acres still to be dug up. And if you don't believe that, just consider the other incredible finds to come from the site. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.